everybody. So the GM burned all of their DMing books in a fit of rage and frustration. So session's canceled. Welcome back, or welcome to the first. Welcome, fucking. Yeah. All right, solid start. Strong start.
We're welcome.
Solid start.
Welcome
hashtag solid start 2.0.
Good.
Was this just an anger of the DM burning all the books?
I think I was trying to say, if this is your first time, welcome new person, but the whole sentence fell apart. Anyway, yeah. Tis I. It's
Have
Josh.
we ever had a good cold open?
Yes, but not in a while. Anyway,
sometimes it's
Matt is also here. Matt, say hello.
I am here too. Hello.
Yes, Isaiah is also here.
Hey, what's good?
And Sam is also here.
Yep, it's me, your boy, the guy who's like here every other week.
Yeah. He's here this
time.
Just
can't get out of the void.
Yeah.
He's here this time, which is good because I'm gonna need to lean on Sam, I think, for this one a bit.
Is it because I've played more games?
I mean, in so many words, yeah. That was not how I was gonna phrase it, but you know. Before we go down the deep dark journey, though, I know we don't usually do this. We're gonna start doing this now at the beginning, just because raisins doesn't matter. We're doing it anyway. So
raisins,
because raisins. If you are so interested and intrigued by what we are saying, please give us a follow on your podcast platform of choice. If there is a rating system on said platform, also maybe give us a good rating. That'd be nice. If you are listening on the YouTubes, hit the subscribe and the like button. Real good. Also, comment about why you, I don't know, hate my face or whatever. Helps out the algorithm. And if you would like to keep up to date, follow us on the Twitters, because despite Elon Musk's best efforts, it has not burned down yet. It still exists.
Mm-hmm. Tweet us why Sneak Attack should be banned.
No,
I will kill you.
I mean, you can tweet us why Sneak Attack should be banned, and then Sam will write a dissertation twit longer about why you're wrong.
Best arguments win.
I absolutely will.
Yeah. Sam will just go absolutely buck wild on your ass.
I'll be like, all right, this is how I feel about X person.
Yeah.
It's just a twit longer, and then it's actually just all Sneak Attack.
Yeah.
See, I'm just looking at a class. All right, we're gonna take rid of this and this and this. Here you go. It says I'm just a commenter. Yep.
I just want Sam to write a dissertation on chaos theory and prove to somebody mathematically why they're stupid.
Jesus, pulls out the whiteboard.
Yeah.
That's a lot of effort.
Holy shit.
Effort I could 100% see Sam putting into something.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Anyway, we come here, gathered on this fateful day of some random day in November. It's not really that faithful at all. To talk about. I feel like I need a better phrase, but I'm just going to say GM mechanics because I can't think of a better name for it.
GM facing mechanics?
GM centric mechanics, I guess.
GM tools.
GM tools, that's a good way to put it. Yeah. Okay. So just to give a little background story, just because, I don't know, it's kind of funny. This was the idea I had for this. I had written this down as a possible topic in the future forever ago, but the reason that it popped into my brain now was Isaiah being like, why do you get so mad at 5e? And me being like, well, I do have a reason, but it would take too long for me to go into it. So now we're going to talk about today why I get so mad at 5e. And why I find it
my fault. Makes me happy.
It's not, I mean, fault is a strong word, but you definitely influence the scenario. So, do with that information what you want.
Is it because it's the greatest role-playing game of all time? You never need any others?
Look, I'm just saying, GURPS is a good game. I just...
Bruh. Anyway, so yes, this is we're gonna GM mechanics in the way of okay. God, I need to figure out where our brain wants to start with this. So I think I need to establish not definition, not definitions, but what I mean.
Let's give a couple examples.
Yeah, we're gonna start there. So I'm not even necessarily well, actually, before I establish a couple examples, there's going to be a lot of ragging on 5e probably in this. And really this just comes down to the fact that A, it's because this is something that 5e does that annoys me, and B, 5e is the game I'm playing right now, so 5e is on the mind. There are other games that work like 5e in terms of GM side things that I get equally annoyed with, such as Pathfinder, or a game like Vampire the Masquerade, or like, you know, any games that have that very old school style of GMing stuff, like any old White Wolf shit is all kind of like that. What's another good example? A lot of the old Warhammer games, to my understanding, also have a GMing vibe similar to how 5e does it. Because, you know, back in the day, so I should say similar to how D&D does it, right? Because back in the day, everyone wanted to be D&D and everyone tried to be D&D. Nowadays we get games that are like vastly, like, you know, way different. I mean,
Oh, yeah.
now we have games like Fiasco, which is like you roll a single d6 occasionally, and then you basically just say a bunch of prompts about why your characters fuck up robbing a bank. Because that's what that game's about, in case anyone was curious. Or Microscope, which is a game about building an entire like world from scratch using game mechanics with the group.
The Adventure Zone guys did that in their campaign they're currently playing.
Yeah.
They played that game to build the campaign world.
Yeah, a lot of people do
and then
that.
play the campaign in it. Yeah,
because Microscope is literally, I don't remember how the sort of prompts and everything work, but the idea is it's a GM-less game. Everybody sits down and you all collaborate on different like prompts and whatnot, different ideas, and build up a world from nothing. So a lot of people do use it as like, we're going to do this and then play in the world we made. But anyway, so yes, there's going to be some 5e ragging because, again, game I'm playing, and 5e is just a good example for the thing I'm talking about. The other baseline I want to lay down real quick is this is not me saying which method is better. All right, I'm gonna be comparing two major methods here, and this is not me saying one method is better than the other. What this is me saying is I like one method a lot more than the other, personally. But that's not me saying it's objectively better, and you know, we'll get into that. So I'm not staking any, you know, I'm not making any religious doctrine here.
What?
It might sound like I am. It might sound like I am. I'm not trying to. Let's put it this way. It might come off a little bit. I'm not
Josh,
trying
plant your fucking feet.
I mean, I will plant my feet for myself personally, yes. But, you know, I'm not going to say one is objectively better.
This is my opinion. This is fact. This is
right.
the law.
So, GM side mechanics. What the fuck do I even mean by that? Because a lot of people, and Matt, you're probably in this list, and I don't know, Isaiah, you may or may not be on this list too. A lot of people are going to hear me say GM side mechanics and be like, oh, you mean shit like loot tables and like roles and rules for like weather and like how to map a dungeon, right? That kind of shit. Not what I'm talking about. They are a thing, and they are a mechanic in the sense that they are a rule in the rule book. So every rule in a rule book is a mechanic, right? So they are a mechanic on a technicality. But when I'm talking about GM side mechanics, I'm not talking about like a loot table or whatever. What I'm talking about is a mechanic that the GM uses that drives the game and is like the primary focus or driving force in some nature. So to give you a comparison to like the players, right? A player side mechanic that drives how you play the game is, if in the D&D example, your class, right? Wait, am I everyone on the same page with me so far?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right? So the mechanic of you pick a class is a driving mechanic for you as a player, because you say, I'm going to play the paladin, ergo I have spell slots and I do smites. I'm not going to do sneak
Smite
attacks
slots.
and cunning actions because I'm not a rogue. So when I'm talking about GM side mechanics, I'm talking about shit along those lines where it's a very like specific. I feel like I need a better word, but
Can
it's
you,
very,
I would say, can you use an example?
yeah. So
Just so I know, so I
So-
don't pick, because
and
I
that's
did
That's
have
what he's trying
a,
to get
not a loot table, but I had a table on here that I will now delete.
yeah, so that's what I mean, right? So like so here's the major difference, okay? and this is going to get a little game design-y philosophy, but I will give you an example once I say this. The difference is a loot table, or how to build a dungeon, or a bunch of rules for weather, or rules for traps, right? All the stuff that you have in like your DMG for 5e. Those sorts of rules are rules that you as a GM will implement when the players run into it, right? You only roll on the magic item table if your players are about to get a magic item. So they looted a horde, or they found some guy that they killed and he's got some stuff, right? That's the only time you're going to roll on the loot table. You're not going to roll on the magic item table in between sessions for no goddamn reason, because it doesn't do anything. You only use the loot table when your players encounter that scenario. You only use the rules for hazardous weather when your players are in hazardous weather. So those are reactive mechanics, right? The mechanics I'm talking about are mechanics that actually drive the game. So like the good example, everyone get ready to take a shot. Here comes Apocalypse World. Apocalypse World has a mechanics called fronts. The entire GMing system of how you run that game is based around how fronts work. If you are playing Apocalypse World and you are not using fronts, you are literally not playing Apocalypse World. You're playing basically a whole different game. You're just ignoring the book. That it would be like playing D&D and saying nobody uses classes. You're playing a new thing at that point, right? Which is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just saying you're playing a whole new game. That's how important fronts are to Apocalypse World. The fronts literally drive the game. Like, you as a GM huh?
What is a front? So, just because I know it as one context, but I want to hear the Apocalypse World.
So version. You probably know the context of what it is referencing, which is to say the term comes from a war on multiple fronts. And it is quite literally that. Fronts in Apocalypse World are essentially you as the GM, so you don't start with fronts in the first session. In the first session, Apocalypse World basically tells you, take things slow, get to know the characters, and kind of fuck around a bit. That's how your first session is supposed to generally go. And obviously, you can adjust that in varying degrees. So you'd say you do your first session of Apocalypse World, and the players run into a local gang boss. They learn that there's a sandstorm a couple of miles out that's going to be here in a few days or in a week or something. And also there's an infestation of mutated rats under the city that they live in, right? Let's say they learn those three things in the first session. Each of those would then become a front. Sorry, I paused for a second because I heard like a noise, but I think it's just my cat. Each of those would become a front. So you would make a front for the sandstorm, a front for the bandit captain, and a front for the rats. And then you do what's called a countdown clock, which is where it's literally a clock. You go around a circle, and at each stage of the clock, the front in question does a different thing. And you as the GM decide ahead of time kind of what those actions might be. But the way you're supposed to think about it is, because all the fronts have like types and stuff, which I'm not going to get into because that'll like take forever. But fronts have types, and then the types of fronts have certain things that they generally will do, like try to do. They will have I think they call them impulses, I think is how they're phrased, or something, or drives might be. So you'll make a front for the bandit captain, you'll set up a countdown clock, and the way you're supposed to think about the steps of the clock is, what would happen if the players never intervene with this NPC? What will they do? So for example, let's take the bandit captain. If the players never ever go and talk to the bandit captain, this person's goal is they want to conquer the city that the players live in. So the first step on the front is they start gathering troops. The second step on the front is they send out scouting parties to the city. The third step on the front is they start actively putting a barricade around the city. And then steps 4 and 5 would be like attack the city. Step 5 is conquer the city. And that would be the front for the bandit captain. If the players don't do anything, that is what is going to happen. You have declared this is what is going to happen if they don't touch it. Conversely, if you have the rat infestation, you might be like, if the players ignore the rat infestation, people will start to notice food go missing. People start to get sick. A lot more people start dying. The food supply goes bad. A shitload of people die from a rat poisoned infestation. That's how fronts generally work. There's some other little like bits and bobs. You can add custom abilities and moves to fronts and stuff where it makes sense, if it's appropriate, blah blah blah. But that's kind of the general idea. So all that is to say, that whole mechanic, that whole design is a thing that the GM does that the players don't ever see, right? Like, you're not supposed to show your players your fronts. It doesn't, you're supposed to inform the players about the fronts by giving them hints and what's going on. So for example, with the bandit captain, step 2 is someone in the town might inform the players, we've been seeing these weird scouting parties that keep showing up, but we don't know who they are. So you're supposed to inform the players via stuff happening, but you're not supposed to literally show them your fronts.
Okay, so can I, like, because I'm trying to process it in my brain between what I know people talking about, like third party and stuff, between like a D&D example, like let's say you have a bad guy. Bad guy's goal is to, I don't know, make phylactery.
Yes.
And then you build 3 steps on how they're going to do that, and the party may get involved in either of those steps or confront the bad guy at either of those steps. But if the players never do, then the bad guy does his thing.
Yes.
Am I? Okay.
Yes, that is the general idea.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of people will actually graft, whether intentionally or not intentionally. People will often use fronts for lots of games because they can be put on a lot of types of games very easily.
They just function really
they function really well.
Everything.
Yeah, they function like well and they can function pretty broadly, or they can be as broad or not broad as you want them to be. So people will often use them in other games. And it's a good way. It's also, if you're doing like an more open world game, it's a good way to have like multiple things bouncing around at the same time that the players can like run into. But the main point of the fronts is that you, as the GM, once you make those fronts, you cannot ignore them, right? Like, you are essentially making a contract with yourself. This is what's gonna happen. This is what's going on. Now, again, the fronts assume the players aren't gonna, fronts assume non-player intervention. If a player intervenes, the front can change or end or whatever. So in the bandit captain example, if the players murder the bandit captain and all the bandits give up, that front is no longer a thing, right? Like, it closes out, it's done, they're cool. Now, then there could be a front that comes out of that front where, now the lieutenant tries to become the new captain, and that's a different front. But the idea is that you're making a sort of contract with yourself. This is what's going on. This is how it's going to happen. I'm going to follow the guidelines and rules that the game tells me I should do, which is where the like types of fronts come in. So like, you're not really supposed, if you declare, I wish I could remember, I guess I can pull up my Apocalypse World stuff, but the idea is like, if a front is of a certain type, you're supposed to have them do stuff that would make sense for their type. So like, if basically you don't play them out of character, right? Like, is kind of the basic idea, because you're kind of cheating yourself, right? The difference there in all that shit between something like that and something like, a loot table is, like I said, the loot table and the weather rules, those only come up when they're relevant. Fronts are 24/7. Every time you're playing, you're always looking at your fronts. They're always relevant. There's always doing something. Shit's always going on. So that's kind of the core difference for me. Before I continue, any questions? As the teachers would say, questions, comments, or concerns?
No, I think I'm good. Although we've discussed fronts pretty much ad nauseum in preparation for my game. So like,
true. Sam, I know you've been in games where there are GM side style mechanics. Have you run anything with like heavy emphasis GM style mechanics like this?
I've not run anything, but I've read the rule books.
Okay.
Like Vampire doesn't have anything on them.
Yeah, Vampire doesn't have much.
It's very much so, hey, write out a story and just kind of go with it.
Just go with it, yeah. So, to give a quick example, because I pulled it up real quick. So, like, a couple of front examples is you can have a warlord dictator, and their impulse is to control. So you're always supposed to be, anytime you're running them or making them do something, you're supposed to think about how they're trying to control things. So the warlord dictator is not going to nuke everyone from orbit because that's not their impulse, right? So you're supposed to play to the type. And they give you a couple of example moves too. So for example, push the battle, outflank someone, attack someone suddenly, attack someone cautiously, seize someone or something. You know, so they give you a bunch of like, these are the things these types of characters would do. Another example, another good like GM side mechanic example is in Stars Without Number. There's a mechanic called the faction turn system.
Very similar to Fronts.
It has a similar vibe to Fronts. The main difference with the faction turn system is you're playing like a weird board game by yourself. Because in Stars Without Number, the faction turn system, essentially, you create a bunch of factions within your star sector. Because in Stars Without Number, you know, you're only jumping around a small section of space. It's not like Star Wars. You're not going from one end of the galaxy to the other. So you're setting up factions in your sector, and there's literally money. Like, the factions have money mechanics. They have equipment they can buy. They have troops they can buy. They have moves they can do. They have abilities they can use, all based on what type of faction, how big they are, where they are. Like, they could do all sorts of shit. Like, they could do shit like, oh, they can send fucking cybernetic ninja assassins at another faction. They can move where a planet is on the star map by fucking with navigations. You can send like military envoys and demagogues to other planets and ambassadors to like screw with the political situations or whatever. Like, there's all, like, anything you could think of in like a sci-fi military setting. Stars Without Number, the factions probably have some sort of ability like that. And with Stars Without Number, you don't necessarily, you're not 100% playing to the factions all the time, but what you're doing is you're using, between sessions, between every couple, I believe the book tells you to do it between every, like, adventure arc, basically. But if an adventure arc's taking a really long time, it will sometimes say, like, do it every, like, couple of sessions. And what you're doing, because Stars Without Number is supposed to be kind of a sandboxy space game, is you're using the faction turn between sessions. So you, as a GM, you literally sit down and roll dice and do things with each of the factions. So like their actions, they can attack, they can buy assets, they can change their homeworld, they can expand their influence, they can refit an asset, they can repair an asset, sell an asset, seize a planet, or use an ability. So you're looking through the list and you're making them do one of these on their faction turn. And it's like a weird board game you play with your... Actually, I say board game. It's a spreadsheet game. You have a spreadsheet of all... you have a spreadsheet, basically, of what all the factions have. And then you, like, roll dice based on what information they have. And then they sort of attack each other or help each other. And then once the
honestly,
players...
I kind of like that.
Huh?
I said, honestly, I kind of like that.
Says the spreadsheet gamer.
So here's the thing. I know that sounds like an insanely, like, awful, like, why the fuck? It is not as bad as it sounds. A, the spreadsheets, not that complicated. Like, they're not that crazy. And B, you're only doing it every once in a while. You're not doing it all the time, you know? And you're not doing it during a session. That's the important thing. You do it between sessions, and then when your players arrive, they interact with one of the factions, and then you can tell them about what's going on in the world via a member of the faction. So, like, let's say one of the factions is a fucking Wayland Nutani, which I'm now blanking on where I'm stealing that from, but whatever.
Aliens.
Aliens, thank you. So one of the factions is Wayland Nutani Corporation. They're on a nearby asteroid. They've got a big mining gig going on, and they're trying to expand their influence. The players land on a planet near the asteroid where Wayland Nutani's working. They talk to, like, a high up member of the faction. They find out, oh yeah, we're trying to expand our influence. We're actually going over to another nearby asteroid, but we're in a fight with someone else right now because they already own the asteroid. So we're kind of attacking them. and the players learn all that, and then you can, make an adventure out of it. Or if the players get really invested in a particular faction, a whole campaign could come up. This is often what happens with Stars Outnumber, is the players take jobs from the various factions because you're supposed to be kind of like freebooters, right? Or what are they called in Warhammer, Isaiah? The
freebooters? Rogue traders.
Rogue trader. Yeah, you're kind of like a rogue trader where you're flying around doing jobs for whoever will pay you. So a lot of the time what ends up happening in Stars games is the players will go to a faction. You'll use your faction turn to decide what kind of job they might get. You give them the job, they do the thing. And then the players can affect the faction turn too. So like if the players blow up a fucking base for one of the factions, you could just remove that asset from the faction list because the players did it, So it's actually really fun because it gives you all sorts of interesting, because when you're running a game, right? A lot of people in D&D, people do this all the time. It's like, oh, I have all these different factions in my setting. And then, they'll just kind of make decisions like, oh, this faction beats this faction and this guy's doing this, right? But when you have this faction turn system, you can sometimes have these scenarios where one faction fights another, and then you're like, oh shit, I didn't think they would win that scenario. Oh, this changes everything. Like I specifically remember in my Stars Outnumber game, there was like a planet rebellion that was going against their own government, and this was it was very Star Wars in that the planet rebellion had very little chance. Like they did not have as good as stats, they did not have as much money or any of that shit, but they got a couple of really good rolls for a good couple of turns and got a lot of momentum, like kind of out of nowhere. And so that became this interesting thing where I'm looking at that like, all right, how do I explain this or justify this in any way? And I'm sort of coming up with reasons and stuff. Unfortunately, I don't think the players ended up seeing that, but it was still, it's like a fun thing. It's like this, you're playing your own little tabletop game between the tabletop game. So it's interesting. I know maybe Isaiah, you might be hesitant at the word spreadsheet. But it is actually a cool system.
So, what's funny? Like, as you're talking about this, I do this in my game. Like, it's like using the thing but not knowing its name, because I will do this. Like, whenever there's like political movement in the game, it's like, okay, if these two factions were to fight, and you do the weird GM math where you're like, they got like this many guys, so I'm gonna make them, give them a +5, and these guys, they got this many guys, but they're hard to fight, so like, you just do a lot of like floating modifiers, and then you end up with something. And I have like written it down on paper. Don't ask me to explain it. It's just numbers. It looks like the fucking Da Vinci Code. And then you roll some dice. Usually I do like best of 3. And then whatever happens there, like one thing goes forward, and then I'll usually have something written down for that bit. Or if the other thing goes forward, then I have something written down for that bit. And then I can sort of branch off thought paths. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I think a lot of people do what you're saying, where they will kind of decide on the fly, be like, this group gets a +5, this group gets a +3, let's see what happens. People definitely do that. The benefit of the faction turns and Stars Outnumber is because the designer sat down and built interconnecting systems. It feels a lot more like, because the way you're doing it, right, it's like it's a little arbitrary because you have to kind of decide on the fly, like, and they have this many dudes and they're in this scenario, right? But if you have very discrete like numbers and mechanics behind it, all the numbers are very like, this number hits that number, it's very specific. And then using the mechanics like as they are can like surprise you a lot of the time. You could come up with interesting scenarios because it's a really well like tightly designed system. And I'm not saying that the faction turn should even be in like every game or anything like that, because what you're doing, Isaiah, for your game is probably fine, right? Like the idea of a post-apocalypse game, a faction turn is probably a little bit much for that genre, right? It's a little wild.
Sort of. Well, if you put into the context of my setting is very similar to like Fallout, where there is big faction movements going on, at some points it becomes just fucking necessary.
But you're not calculating spaceships, deciding how much a planet costs and where it is in the space sector, trying to figure out if this planet can fire a fucking laser at the other planet, right? Like the sci-fi shit gets really wild when it comes to factions. So a more intricate system kind of makes sense. But yeah, like it's not, this is not me saying a faction turn is like necessary in any regard, but it is a very fun, interesting system. Matt, I think, didn't you also do a similar thing in your game at one point? I feel like I remember you talking about something like this.
What do you mean? Like
doing doing like some faction role shit behind the scenes. Was that you?
That I remember.
Oh, I mean, yeah, I know what you're talking about. Right? This was this is what you were talking about, Matt, with the Sultan and like how the players would react and like what you would do. And
oh yeah. Well, I don't know if that technically counts because I built basically a bunch of the answer. Like, all right, the players can interact with the Sultan. I wrote out like multiple choice answers from like A all the way to like fucking L. I'm like, here's all the things that can happen. And then it's just going to crack down into spider webs of like, all right, if that happens and this happens and if that happens and this happens. I'm not sure if that's exactly the same thing.
No, actually, the way you're describing it sounds like you were doing it a little closer to a front.
Probably. I was going to say most of the examples, I think, because again, mostly I only really run 5e. Most of my examples are probably going to be and end up being fronts because that's something that I actually do end up using, but I end up using the Mike Shea Sly Flourish version, which he even specifically took it from Apocalypse World, and he's like, we're going to simplify this because 5e, and I'm like, yes, thank you.
A lot of people take it from Apocalypse World, and if they don't take it from Apocalypse World, a lot of people end up making a system that is basically the Apocalypse World system and not even realizing it. Another really fun example, since I'm just kind of going through examples right now.
Sure.
Is a straight up GM character sheet.
Nope, fuck that. Get that shit out of here. GMPCs.
No, that's not what it is. See, I knew you were gonna say that, Matt, but that's not what it is.
I'm saying, hold me back. Hold me back. Why aren't you holding me back? Hold me back.
Sam, do you remember Ryutama? Does that game ring a bell, Sam? No?
Not really.
So we didn't end up getting a chance to play, but we were going to, and it sort of fell apart. So Ryutama is it's a Japanese RPG that's very much in the vein of Studio Ghibli, like aesthetically. Like so much so the cover basically looks like a fucking Ghibli film poster. And one of the basic idea of Ryutama is you're a bunch of like just traveling people, like you're just travelers. There's like classes and stuff, but you're a bunch of like traveling homies, and you're getting up to Studio Ghibli nonsense, more or less. You're going on like whimsical adventures, and that's the wrong. I'm trying to. Yeah, okay, here we go. That's what I was looking for. So there's like classes and stuff. So you have like there's a noble and a farmer and an artisan, and then there's like a hunter and a merchant, a minstrel. So you're sort of like, you're traveling around doing the thing. But what's really interesting with Ryutama is that there is a dragon following the party. But this is a very Eastern style dragon, so the dragon's generally nice and friendly, right? And the dragon is sort of like a guardian spirit to the player group. And basically the dragon is the GM character, and you get a character sheet for the dragon, and the different abilities that the dragons have, there's 4. There's a green one, a blue one, a red one, and a black one. The different abilities that the dragons have influence the kind of story you're gonna do, because the abilities they have will push the players in a specific direction. So for each of the dragons, it has Midori Ryu, and then it says Benedictions, Tale of Journey, Tale of Nostalgia, Tale of Traveler's Journal. And then you have Aoi Ryu. I forget how to say blue.
Aoi
Ryu. Benedictions, Tale of Kindness, Tale of Love, Tale of Heart, and then there's Kurenai Ryu, which is Tale of the Hero, Tale of the Legend, Tale of Revival, and then Kuro Ryu, which is Tale of Revenge, Tale of Guidance, Tale of Slaughter. Yeah. So the Green Dragon is like, we're all going on an adventure and we're hugging, loving friends. If I remember correctly, the Blue Dragon is supposed to be more like group interconnectivity stuff. The Red Dragon is like if we want to focus more on combat, and the Black Dragon is if we're going to play like the PG-13 version of the game and things get a little heavy. And this is not a GMPC in that the dragon does not come down in the middle of the fight and like help the players kill shit. That's not what the dragon does. The dragon, in fact, the players know, but the player characters literally don't know the dragon is there, because they generally follow them around in like a animal form or something like that. So like if I remember correctly, each of the dragons has different things they can turn into, like different examples they can turn into.
I'm not gonna lie, this sounds like DMing with extra steps.
So it sounds like it, but it's one of those things where you only do it every once in a while. You're running the game, the dragon comes in every once in a while and sort of pushes the players in a specific direction or like gives them a reward. But the whole time the green dragon's following them as like a green parrot, and they don't know that it's a dragon who's like helping them along their journey. This game's also, if you read a lot of, if you look at a decent amount of Japanese RPGs tend to have an emphasis on short campaigns or one-shots. Probably because, free time in Japan's a little limited. So this game's intended to be like fairly short in terms of campaign. Like you're generally doing like Spirited Away would be one whole adventure of a couple of sessions, so you're not doing it for like super long. It's also not that like not a crazy complicated game either. But like to give an example, one of the benedictions on the Green Dragon, Tale of the Journey, up to 2 PCs who roleplay ardently pursuing the goal of the journey can ignore all weather modifiers for the rest of the session. So it's like because they're going to climb the mountain to go spread Mother's ashes, the Green Dragon helps them along by letting them ignore weather conditions because they're charging forward, so it's like you give them a boost via the dragon. So it's not even really like it's a character in that you play him and describe him, but it's more like mechanical sprinklings that come in every once in a while.
So it's sort of like an explanation as to like a GM's sort of environmental and storytelling control.
Yeah, kind of. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like
right.
GM fiat built into a character almost. And the dragon can like level up and shit too, and gets new abilities as you go on. So yeah. Sorry, I need to take a drink of water in my throat.
Interesting.
Very good. I'm digging. This actually sounds really cool.
The Ryutama one's fun, yeah, and it's not it's not like so crunchy or anything that you're like losing your mind over like, oh, I have to keep track of so much shit. It's a very it's a pretty like basic character sheet for the dragon. But like, so it shows here like session 1, dragon goes up to level 2, 3 sessions, dragon goes up to level 3, 7 sessions, dragon goes up to level 4, 12 sessions, they hit level 5. Right, so it's like real straightforward. And like I said, short, kind of intended to be a short game, which is why it stops at 12 sessions.
So my question there is why does this sort of how do I word this? Why does it have like a character sheet rather than something like a what's the sort of like no because I guess the gangs in I was gonna bring up Blades. The gangs do have character sheets, so I was gonna ask like why when you can do something like the gangs where they're more of just like a stat block, but you'd be doing the same thing either way.
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I unfortunately have not gotten a chance to really play Ryutama, although it's on the list of like one of these fucking days. So I can't tell you too specifically because I'm not 100% sure, but I think it's sort of a combination of it's got a very Japanese folklore vibe to it, to have like a magical dragon following around a group of adventurers, right? That's got a very folkloric feel to it. So I think that's part of it. And I think the other reason is by making it specifically like a GM character sheet, it's to indicate GM, this is for you and you only, right? Like when you're talking about like the Blades, for example, crew sheet, the players all fuck with that, including you as the GM in some regard. The Ryujin's character sheet is you only, right? Like the players do not interact with it in any way. So I assume those are kind of the two main reasons that I can think of. I don't know like 100%, but there is also some other abilities they get later where like the dragon can like swoop in and like attack or like help out for like a turn or whatever. But if I remember correctly, the game also specifically says don't make the dragon a DMPC where every 5 seconds. Don't make the dragon Gandalf. That's not the point. And in fact, the dragon can't do much in the very beginning anyway because they don't have that many abilities. So like, yeah, it's not a like this is your DMPC. It's gonna follow you around all the goddamn time. Like it's not. That is not the point. Like yes, it's following you around, but not in that way. That one, obviously, that is a bit of a weirder example as far as like GM side mechanics go. Most games are not gonna do that. Those are the main examples I have. I'm sure there's some others I've come across that's not pumping into my brain right this moment. But
I mean, the biggest one is Fronts.
Fronts is like, Fronts is the one that's, again, it's sort of universalness makes it really good. It's also in the game I like a lot, big shocker. And it can be, Fronts is one of those things where, what was it, maybe like 2 episodes ago, Sam, we were talking about how reading other games makes the game you like better. Fronts is a perfect example because you can read and run Apocalypse World and then look at Fronts and go, oh, this is great. I bet I could use this in D&D and then apply it to D&D and make your D&D game better, So it's like, and as Isaiah and Sam both pointed out, a lot of people kind of already do Fronts without even knowing it. There's some other like not as strong examples. So I mentioned countdown clocks and Blades are also kind of a GM like mechanic because they help you. They sort of guide your, they guide things along, in terms of like how. Because clocks often sort of become a form of affront, right? Where it's like, oh, once this countdown clock fills, this person's gonna die or whatever. And then, but also clocks can be really helpful to track shit on player side. So there's sort of something that, the GM bequeaths to the players like, GM, I would like to make a new designer drug. All right, player, here's a countdown clock. Let me know when you work on that.
Why does that sound familiar?
That sounds familiar because I'm pulling a reference from a very specific game that me and Sam played, where one of the players wanted to make a designer drug because we were coke dealers.
Nice.
Yeah. What was the other one that popped into my brain? I'm looking at my games folder. Oh, now I can't remember. Oh, Masks has a really interesting GM mechanic. That a lot of people are probably going to hear and or read and go, what the fuck are you talking about, Willis? But it is very important to the vibe of the game. So in Masks, because you're playing teenage superheroes, right? Like it is very explicit in Masks. Your character cannot be over 18 because the game is about teenagers. You're not playing X-Men. You're playing X-Men Evolution specifically. You're not allowed to be, and you're not allowed to be adult Scott in X-Men Evolution. Right? You have to be one of the kids. So Mass has this mechanic where adults in the game can tell a character what to do because it's an adult telling a child what to, like your mom yelling at you to go do your homework or whatever. And adults can have moves where they can actually force you to do shit, or you can resist them, but resisting what an adult tells you to do will actively change your stats on the fly. So usually what it is like one stat will go up and one stat will go down is like generally how it goes. Which I know, again, a lot of people are going to be like, bro, what the fuck? That's crazy. But it's part of the point of the vibe of the game, you know? So like a good example will be if you're playing the Bull, which is one of the playbooks, and then you smash up you go Superman and you just smash the fuck out of the city with no regard. And then like a police officer tells you that you're a dangerous psycho and you need to like cool the fuck down, then your danger stat will go up and your mundane stat will go down because you're less of a person and you're acting more like a dangerous weapon. Just as a very simple example. That mechanic also obviously will not work in a lot of games because it's very specific, but it drives the tone so well that you can't like not have it, you know what I mean? Anyway, I'm doing a bunch of talking. Yeah. Any other thoughts anyone else wants to throw out for the time being?
I feel bad. The only ones I can think of are like, well, like one is the it's not in the game yet, but I know one D&D's nuts is they're bringing in like a base building system, and I'm so excited. I'm so like unbelievably hyped because the game that I'm running, Hellscapes, was supposed to do this shit like years ago, and they just never did. And while I love the MCDM strongholds and followers, I feel like the strongholds are like they're good, but it's not really the direction that I wanted it to go in. You know what I mean? Like I needed like rules for like interfaction play, you know? And it was more of like hiring guards, doing this.
That's what the next book, well, Kingdoms of Warfare, you kind of do that interfaction play a lot more.
Yes, I need that in my life.
Yeah. I also would recommend looking at the, if you go on DM's Guild, the Eberron Oracle of War bases and scrap, salvage bases and missions. It's basically a, D&D base building thing. You collect a bunch of material, you build your own base, and each thing, has different benefits. So it's kind of like that. I'm not sure exactly if this also has like faction play at all, but if you ever want to put a base in your game and you're like, I don't want the MCDM thing, that seems like a bit much.
I got nice alternative for Matt. I got a bajillion bases and fucking stronghold and factions. I have so many. Bro, I did a count the other day, and I'm not even finished with the count. I've got like over 150 NPCs, and I'm just like, why did I do this to myself? Why do I have to keep track of these fuckers? God damn it. Fuck.
Yeah.
You can use an NPC once and then throw them away, right? You don't have to keep them around.
I could, yeah.
But you can have one-off NPCs.
I do, but the players always come back and they're like, where's that guy? And I'm like, who the fuck? Yeah, I found a character the other day, right? I was like, who the fuck is this? And it took me like soul searching. It was a character who met the party, right? Like, cause they're like, oh, go meet with this gang, right? So the person went to pick them up to bring them to the actual informant to go see the boss. You know what I mean? As like this weird roundabout sort of throw them off their game. And I was racking my brain 10 minutes before session as I was like trying to organize my folders, being like, who the fuck are you?
Woosmans, where are you at? That's where you Control F and search for the name.
I did, and I knew what faction they were part of, but I'm like, who? Oh my! And like I had like a brain blast, like, oh, it's this person's niece. Oh my god, jeez, man.
So you mentioned the base building thing. Let's get into that. Let's go on the 5e tirade here, right? Because I did mention this was going to happen. So that mechanic, the like build a base thing, is again another example of not what I would call a GM mechanic, really, because it is reactive, not proactive. That's the fucking word I was looking for before. 45 minutes late.
Tough acting to acting.
Proactive.
Oh my God, it's 50 minutes already.
He's been talking a while.
What the fuck?
I knew this. I had a feeling this was going to happen. Oh, well. Proactive was the word I wanted. So, yes. So that's the thing about 5e in terms of like mechanics in the GMG and like, you know, mechanics they add in books and stuff. They're all very reactive mechanics, right? Even the base building thing, you're only going to do that if your players actively are looking for and or want a base, you know, right? Like nothing
or if
about
you put it in front of them.
Or if you
like,
yeah.
Like it's definitely something that's not
it's not driving the game.
Yeah.
Right? Whereas the faction turn and fronts literally drive the game, right? Like the way you run the session is directly influenced by the way those mechanics are handled, unless you ignore them. But obviously in this whole discussion, we're assuming you're using the mechanics in question.
I'd hope so.
Yeah. So
well, you don't just casually throw out entire mechanics to games that you play before you actually like have tried them in practical use, and you just go, no,
I don't just look at Rogue and throw away sneak attack. You're right.
God, no, imagine throwing away sneak attack.
I try not to. So the reason, Isaiah, because if you remember, as I said at the very beginning of this, I get really frustrated with running 5e. And I think one of the main reasons that I have identified is 5e does not have a proactive GM mechanic like this. So you're doing everything sort of your own whim, right? You know, you're deciding, you know, not randomly, right? Like you're basing it off sort of the narrative, but you're deciding, oh, there's going to be a dungeon that I want to do a dungeon. The players are going to run into a dungeon in the next mission, you know? Oh, I want to have a boss fight, so they're going to fight a Dracolich. You know, shit like that, right? Like, here, let's just use my game as an example. You guys fighting a Dracolich was basically just me going, I want to have a dragon fight. Oh, cool undead dragon. Yeah, let's do that, right? Like, that was the impetus for a Dracolich. I later justified further why the Dracolich made sense, but, you know, that was the vibe. And now, again, this is not me saying this is a bad thing, but the game basically says to you, you're on your own, like, figure it out, right? And then when you run into scenarios where you might need to build a base, you might need to deal with weather, you might need to map out a dungeon, then the game goes, oh, I have a little something, something for that. But getting to that point is up to you. You following me?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Matt, are you also following me?
Sort of.
Sort of? What are you confused
with? It's more so you've been talking a lot, and there's a lot of points where I'm like, all right, let me put that in the jogging. All right, let me put that down. Oh shit, we're moving on. Oh no, okay, I'm
no. I mean, look, I knew I was going to talk. I forgot to say this in the beginning, but I was going to say I'm going to be talking a lot, so just interrupt me whenever you have a thought, because that's the only way this is going to work.
Yeah.
So if you have a thought, just jump in now.
No, I'm just gonna sit in my confusion.
I mean, are you confused about something specific? Because if you're confused, then I want to try and clarify.
The problem is I'm not sure what I'm confused about. That's why I'm confused.
Okay, well that.
Oh no.
I know.
Yeah, I kind of lost the plot a long time ago. I'm just kind of like I don't know what's going on.
What I'm saying.
Matt's listening to one of my fate rants.
Yeah,
he just stopped paying attention to the whiteboard.
Okay,
I just glazed over about an hour ago.
Listening, you guys talk about going. Kingdom Hearts, and I'm like, all
right, here, Matt,
where are we?
let me try and analogy this shit, and then tell me if this works better. All right. Let's use Apocalypse World and 5e as our two comparison points, right? So Apocalypse World, we got our fronts, right?
Yeah.
Apocalypse World, when I'm running the game, basically says to me, here's an outline. You may follow the outline. In fact, you should follow the outline. But it's an outline. You could change things in between, right? Like, that's the point of an outline. You do the outline, and then you change stuff later. You get more specific. D&D says, here's a box of information about the book you're writing. I don't know what order it comes in or where any of it is, but if you need me to pull some information out to give you a hand, I can if you come across it.
Right.
That's the difference.
Okay.
And again, not saying one is superior, I personally, though, really like having the GM outline mechanics because it funnels the way I run the game into a very specific flow, and it gets me in a really good groove a lot of the time. And the worst part, the absolute worst part about 5e for me is transitioning from one big thing to the next thing. That dead time in between of like, we just did a big boss fight, we just did a big dungeon, we just found some crazy loot, transitioning to the next interesting thing, that dead zone is fucking hell for me. I hate it. I hate it so much because the game has nothing for me, so I have to decide what I want to do. But it's that problem where when you have no constraints, it's actually harder than if you have some constraints. You know what I mean? Whereas if I'm playing Apocalypse World and a front ends, I go, okay, that front's over, but I bet I could form a new front out of it. Or if I don't want to form a new front out of the old one, I can just move on to one of the fronts that already exists and just shift over to the new one. You know?
Well, I mean, 5e kind of has something like that. They don't go into as much detail, but they're like, oh, you beat the Necromancer, but it turns out the Necromancer was working for the Lich.
5e,
like they say that as an example, but they don't give you like the outline like you're looking for. I agree with you there. And they kind of do that on purpose because they're like, do whatever you want.
Yeah, well, what 5e kind of does is, and again, this also applies to games like Pathfinder and Vampire the Masquerade, right? Is they will give you, it's almost like they're giving you creative writing prompts, right? It's like you're doing an improv class, and 5e is throwing out the possible prompt options, right? But they're not guiding you. They're just throwing you that initial prompt and then saying, you could maybe do this or maybe do that. And you'd
rather them tell you like, hey, do this next rather than give you the prompts?
I would rather a guiding system of some kind to kind of get from point A to point B, because when I'm working within the constraints, it then will like fuel new ideas. And also a big thing too with the fronts is because the fronts have the types, if I'm looking at through my fronts in Apocalypse World and I go, I don't know what the fuck this NPC would do in this situation, and then I look at it and it says, oh, this NPC's a grotesque. Oh, so he'd probably do this because that's one of the things that they would, that's one of the moves they'll try to do a lot of the time. And then how would I can kind of, so if he does this, that justifies and that makes sense. Yeah. So it's like, whereas in a similar situation in 5e, you might go, all right, how is the captain of the guard going to respond to this situation? It's like, well, I don't know this NPC that well yet because he's just come up. So I guess I'm kind of deciding his personality right now on the fly, you know? Now,
right.
There's pros and cons to both systems, obviously. Right? The pro to the 5e system, which is why I think Isaiah's not going to be on my side in this discussion, is the 5e system is like, you can do whatever the fuck you want, bro. Right? Like, open table. It's fucking free range. Go wild. Which is good if the ideas are flowing all the time, right? I think that's, The downside is the shit I was saying before. The pros to a system, again, I'm talking about fronts, but this applies to a lot of GM mechanics. Like, this is kind of the point of them, is that they'll push you in a direction, but if you have a specific idea that really pushes against the direction that the game is pushing you, then you have some conflict, like, oh, this front is this type and I want them to do this, but that's kind of doesn't fall under the purview of things that the game says they would do. So now I have to kind of decide, do I fight against the game? Do I try and make it work? Do I just try something totally different? And I don't know. I mean, I guess y'all can throw an opinion on this. For me, I kind of like I have the constraint and then I have an idea and I have to think about how the idea fits the constraint. I like that flow a lot. generally more, I think.
Yeah. Well, so I think we've talked about this before. Just fuck my entire mic's position up. We've talked about this before. I think the problem that you run into is that I don't think you've run 5e enough to like.
I don't know. I'm pretty deep in it at this point.
You are, but I think that you spend so much time like potentially trying to fight it that you are maybe stuttering your progress and just sort of trying to work around it. You know what I mean? Does that make sense?
I mean,
it's like you're trying to run it as like Apocalypse World or
no, I don't.
Star Wars or whatever. And no,
I don't. I actively, I always try to run a game within the sort of purview that the game wants me to do. But because the purview of 5e is so open, I often don't know what direction to go in because I come to a fucking 8-way intersection as opposed to Apocalypse World where I come to a 2-way intersection.
See, it's weird because when originally I asked you guys, like, was it last year or 2 years ago about Mask? And I couldn't get into it because I'm like, what the fuck? This is so vague. I'm like, I couldn't get into any of the. I'm like, I never want to hear you complain about 5e being vague. This is vague.
Yeah.
So it's weird.
I really don't understand you misinterpreted something in that book. I don't know what it was that you were reading that gave you that impression. It is not as vague as it seems. It's different. It's very different, and it is it is. If you haven't played a Powered by the Apocalypse game before, your brain may not be able to latch on to what do you mean there's no initiative or hit points, but usually there's a good reason for it, you know? But it isn't vague. It's I don't know what word I would use, but vague is not the word.
I don't know, because I felt like that, where I was like, where are the, tell me from point A to point B to point C. And Mask was just like, yeah, man, just do whatever. I don't know, like fucking you're a superhero or something. And I'm like, what do you mean or something?
It is worth pointing out, Masks doesn't use fronts for starters, which is one point.
Yeah, because I looked at the cool art and I'm like, yeah, I want to use this bad guy. How do?
Well,
book shrugs. Good question.
No, the book absolutely tells you. There's a whole section on how to run bad guys.
Not how to run them, but not how to like implement them in the story or like set up in like an encounter or something like that.
But that's what I mean. 5e leaves you hanging on that shit too.
No.
5e gives you a couple of like writing prompt ideas, but it doesn't give you any mechanics on how to implement them in the story. It just says go wild.
Well, because the mechanic is here's the monster, here's the mechanical thing that will fight your players. Throw it in your world.
Masks has that. That's in there.
I don't believe that.
I read the section on running villains in Masks. There is a whole thing on how to do it. Just because you might not be understanding what the vibe is, but it
maybe
is there.
not because I'm not. Yeah, maybe because I just don't get the Apocalypse World system, or maybe I have to watch a couple videos on it. But
the thing about Apocalypse World that throws a lot of people from a GM side of things is they go, wait, the monsters don't have a character, like don't have a sheet, and no, they don't. But instead, what you have as a GM is a list of moves. And really, all moves are, at the end of the day, is like suggested actions.
Wait, how the fuck is that not vague? And you're like D&D, you're like,
because, here's the thing. Well, I'm not, so this is a little different. We're in a different realm.
So moves are very, okay, so I know that they're trying to possibly get rid of this, but in D&D, there's the use item action. All right, that's not very specific. It's just use an item. All right, that could be I use the door handle. I use the bottle. I use a potion on someone. Moves are very similar to that vaguety, but like it's still self-explanatory when you read the move.
Okay,
like. I'm gonna.
Let me pull up the GM moves in Apocalypse World real quick.
So it's basically like an action. Okay.
It's an action. Yes.
Yes. Kind of.
That's what it is. Because it's an action in the sense that it's you're having a specific thing happen.
Yes.
Or you're trying to have a specific thing happen, but it's not like
it's not an attack.
It's not an attack.
It doesn't have
roll
to
a
be
die.
an attack.
No. So here's the thing. First of all, we're kind of talking about a slightly different part of the game now, because when I'm talking about 5e leaving me hanging, I'm talking about sort of running the narrative from point A to point B. When 5e gets very specific and tells you exactly what to do is when you get into things like combat, right? But again, the combat mechanics are a reactive in that, okay, the fight has started. Now the game is going to tell me what to do with combat because there are combat mechanics, right? So it's, but what I was more talking about was the sort of flowing from point A to point B and not having any mechanics to sort of, to like, not control, but to like ebb and flow the, what the fuck was that sentence?
To control the ebb and flow?
Yeah, basically. To sort of guide it, right? So, yeah, moves in Apocalypse World and its subsequent children, usually. So to give you, this is the list of GM moves in Apocalypse World. Separate them, capture someone, put someone in a spot, trade harm for harm, announce off-screen badness, announce future badness, inflict harm, take away their stuff, make them buy, activate their stuff's downside.
I just make them buy. I just
make them buy stuff.
Make them bisexual.
Oh
no.
Yeah, that's what I
Tell
thought.
them.
I thought
make them buy
I
things.
went into like, yeah, you know, a gremlin shows up. You must buy my trophy.
No.
What?
So
No,
what
I
make
don't
them
want-
buy? Usually, make them buy is like in a situation where an NPC wants something and he's not where the players want something and the NPC is not helping them. Make them buy is the NPC says, "Oh, I'll do it if you pay me." That's all make them buy is. Tell them possible consequence and ask, offer an opportunity with or without cost, turn their move back on them, make a threat move. After every move, say, what do you do? Obviously, that last one is you're just doing that all the time. And these moves are all, you only do a move when there's like a downtime or an opening or the players fail a roll. Some of them are really obvious. Trade harm for harm. The player punches an NPC in the face. The NPC punches them back in the face. You both take harm. And then there's inflict harm. You're walking through the ravine. Rocks fall and hit you. Inflict harm on the player. There's ones like announce off-screen badness, which is that thing where you do when you're running and you're like, you see the strange man in the cloak walk past the alleyway. That's announcing off-screen badness. You're hinting at the players some shit's happening somewhere else.
It sounds almost like Apocalypse World and its children give the game a character sheet.
That's an interesting interpretation, but you are not entirely off base with that. Yes.
Yep.
Because essentially what moves are, you may notice when I was reading this list, you may have thought to yourselves, I already do all this shit. Correct. You do already do all this shit. That's kind of the point. The idea was to codify and sort of mechanize behaviors that were kind of already there. And then by making them just a little tighter, like just twisting the knob a smidge, it can guide the GM better. You know, you might not think to have a newer GM might not think, maybe this guy should ask for money from the players. But if you specifically put in the list of moves, make them buy, you may now spark that thought of, I should make them pay for it, you know? Now, that seems like a silly example because who wouldn't think of that? But the idea is like, that's the point. You might not have thought of it, but then the move kind of bonks you on the head. It's like, hey, buddy, what about this one? You're like, oh, yeah. And yeah, you're kind of right, Isaiah, in that the game has a character sheet because when you're running like bad guys, you're gonna do all of these moves, right? The bad guy pulls out a shotgun and shoots the player, inflict harm, right? You're not rolling anything for the bad guy. You just declare it because the GM doesn't roll dice in Apocalypse World. And then if you need a bad guy to do something special, you make a custom move for the bad guy. And if you're making a custom move for the bad guy, that probably means the bad guy is a front, because if they're important enough to get a custom move, they're probably important enough to be a front. You know? Mm. So, yeah, not exactly how I would explain it, but you are kind of correct in that, yes, it's almost like the GM has a game-wide character sheet.
Interesting. I do want to go back to you sort of for me, just so I can get a refresher, and also for the audience, can you explain maybe why you feel like 5e fights you a little bit?
So my issues with 5e fighting me and my issue with 5e not having a GM-sided mechanics are a little different. It's kind of two separate things. So I often feel like 5e is fighting me in regards to I have a cool idea for, anything. A lot of the time it'll come for me. A lot of the time it will involve like monsters. I have a cool idea for how the monster can do this thing. The monster does not have the mechanic for me to do the thing. Okay. My options are do something else, work with what I got, jury rig a mechanic, or just ignore everything and just do it on the fly. I try to avoid the do it on the fly option in 5e because, it feels like a dick move a lot of the time to just sort of ignore the rules when you feel like it, because when everyone sits down and agrees to play 5e, the game is designed in such a fashion that players know if the monster doesn't have an AoE attack, they can only hit one person, right? Like, it's that thing where it's like, I know the troll can only hit one person at a time. If the GM just randomly decides the troll has multi-attack, or not multi-attack, but the troll has like a big AoE attack, you better like justify it to me or give me a reason or something. Otherwise, you're just making up bullshit on the fly, and that feels cheap. So I try not to do that in 5e, Now, if I do adjust stat blocks in that fashion, I will try to justify the thing, right? If I give them a new ability, I'll give some sort of reason, like, oh, this troll has 8 arms, so he has an AoE attack, that kind of shit.
Yeah.
Which I think I literally did with an enemy, if I remember correctly. So in that regard, yes, I get frustrated sometimes because I feel like 5e is fighting me, and it's like, I have this cool idea, but the game does not have a mechanic for it. And I don't want to ignore the mechanics, but I also don't want to shoehorn in something too much. Like, I need to, so it's a fight in that usually I will come up with something, but I have to, it's a delicate dance to sort of come up with the mechanic to fit what I need. Most of the time. Sometimes it's not, but most of the time. In terms of 5e not guiding me, that's kind of like I was saying before, the game does not really give me an outline for the overall running of the system. It gives me, what's the word? It gives me help when I bump into something that the game gives a shit about. So when you bump into combat, the game goes, oh, this is how combat works, because the game cares about combat. When you're running a dungeon, the game goes, oh, here's some dungeon stuff, because the game cares about dungeons. Well, less than it used to, but whatever. Don't need to get into that whole thing. But the space between, like, oh, the players are in the city, I want them to get to the dungeon, how am I gonna go about it? Whereas if I was playing, let's say I'm playing Stars Without Number, I want the players to get to this mechanic. Oh, well, a faction turn just happened on this planet. What is it? I want the players to get to this planet, is what I meant to say that first sentence. Oh, the faction turn just happened, and one of the factions on this planet did this thing, so that's going to influence the players. They're going to have a job involving what just happened in the faction turn. Boom, there's my flow. I have something to latch onto. Whereas with 5e, I would have to do that myself, right? Like, just wholesale, because I don't necessarily have a mechanic to latch onto.
Okay.
You following me there?
I do. I'm trying to put myself in your thought process, because to me, right, that doesn't sound like a major problem. Like, it can be like oh, god damn it, but like it's something that I feel like I can come to a conclusion on.
Oh yeah, of course, you can always come to a conclusion. It is a problem that varies in degrees, right? Like, sometimes it's a big problem because you're just like, I have no fucking ideas. Sometimes it's not a big problem because you're like, oh, who would be, oh, this character would be there. Yeah, that works. It varies. Sometimes you have to think about it for a long time. Sometimes you don't. But the point is no matter how difficult or not difficult it is, you're running D&D, you're not going to get any sort of mechanical guidance on that thing because those mechanics it's just not there. So, you know, it's only a problem. I guess really it's only a problem if you dislike it. You know?
Yeah.
Like again, this is not this is what I was saying. I know you are not on the same page as me with this one, Isaiah. And I don't think Matt is on the same page as me, Isaiah. Either. Wow. I don't think Matt is on the same page as me either. But that's fine. I'm just talking about what at the angle I come at it from. And I think a lot of this is probably fueled by the fact that the game that I ran the most serious when I sort of restarted, because if you remember all the way back to our first recording, I started on 4E, but we didn't play it very long and it wasn't like super serious. So when I came back, when I had my my Dark Knight Returns for tabletop for my GMing, the game I came back to was Dungeon World. And Dungeon World kind of got me back, got my feet wet again. But then Apocalypse World was when I got back, like, actually serious and started, like, really thinking about how to run a game. So much of this is influenced by the fact that that game had such an effect on me for GMing in general and made me like it more, and also opened up my mind to a whole new swath of game design that I would never have even considered before because I only really knew about D&D before. Which happens to a lot of people, right? A lot of people, they only know about D&D. They try out fucking, I don't know, something else. They try out a game of Dungeon World or whatever, and their brain just blows open of all the new possible, like, oh, wait, there's a whole new field of design I didn't even consider. So it just comes down to, it just comes down to my preferences. I'm not saying you have to do it like me. But what I am saying is, if you're making a game and you have a very discreet and well done GM mechanic, I am way more likely to play your game and buy it. I am saying that.
And I think that's fair. I think it's the, you know what it is for me? It's the teacher. I'm the teacher who's always like, make sure you have your fucking pen and paper because you're not always gonna have a calculator. You know what I mean? I think I've just gotten so used to not having those frameworks that I've built up a process by which to like work around them, Yeah,
you can absolutely do it. It's just it's just more fun and more engaging for me if I have like a thing to bounce off of in a way. Like I just prefer it from a running the game standpoint. I just prefer it. It just be like that, I guess. I don't know. But like, obviously I'm running 5e right now, so I am dealing with it. Like I'm not so married to the idea that I fucking can't handle it. It's not that bad. I am curious, Sam, where do you fall on this, if I may so ask, in terms of preference?
I've made a bunch of tools in my head already, so I don't usually end up needing a tool. Like running D&D is fine. I basically already do fronts without actually using the front mechanic or whatever. Like it's just stuff I've always done. So I don't really care if the game gives me mechanics or not to do it. Like they're nice and all, but I don't need them.
Matt?
Yeah, I don't know if I feel about. Sorry, I didn't mean to. Because I get what you were saying, Sam. I'm usually someone where it's like, I'm often willing to like, if I see a mechanic that I'm like, oh, that's a little bit simpler than what I do. Or if I'm like, maybe I might like this more. I'm more often to like throw out the way that I do it to try it somewhere other way. And maybe if I'm like, nah, I don't like that, I'll go back. You know what I mean?
I'm not saying I don't use the tools in front of me. I'm just saying that like I don't mind not having tools because
Sam's saying if the tools aren't there, he just goes, I'll do it myself.
Pretty much.
Which is, is valid. Matt, just out of curiosity, I think I know the answer, but where do you fall in the whole idea?
Same. honestly. Like if there's there's not a resource that I've looked up or I've seen, I'll make it up. Like using the example, your dragon thing. It's like, well, what do I do now? And it's like, well, there's for like story beats, quote unquote. It's like, do I want the players to have some downtime, relax? They just fought a big skeleton dragon man, or do I want to like, ratchet up the tension and be like, oh, there's a new threat looming overhead. I like the little like openness with that, where it's like, well, I can decide, what I want to do with that.
Yeah. I mean, yes, the openness is the main benefit of that method of game design. But
yeah, if there's a tool that doesn't exist within, because like I will say, as someone that looks up a fuck ton of outside resources for D&D 5e specifically, I have found enough that I'm good. I can run the game perfectly fine. I have an answer to probably like 90% of everything, because I built my little PDF folder of shit and I know where to look for certain things. So I'm good. Like, it's like, oh, there's all my players want to build the base. All right, I can use the Kingdoms of Warfare thing. I can use the Eberron thing. Oh, my players want to romance all the NPCs. All right, well, I found a fucking better romance system than fucking DMG.
See, but again, though, this is the thing, Matt, though. What you were just describing, that was all reactive. You know what I mean?
Right. That's
the thing.
Then I guess I'm just gonna go sit in the corner.
No. I'm not. But what I'm just saying is like, no. I'm not saying it's bad. Although I do kind of hate. It does drive me a little crazy that people are like, oh, well, there's all these other resources online. It's like, yeah, but the game should fucking help me out. But that's a different rant. That's a different rant. So I'm not gonna go on that one.
like you were saying with the fronts. Like I've heard. I think just as like someone that like is it like as a storyteller, like that's one of my like the big things with me as someone that likes stories, likes writing stories, making stories, whatever. The fronts idea has always been there, but I never had like a here's how to do it specifically. And then when I looked up the Mike Shea thing, and he stole it from Apocalypse World and built a system for 5e, and I'll even literally he has the front. What is it, or what is the front? The goal. What is the front trying to accomplish? And then the 3 Grim Portents. What are the 3 visible steps that the front is doing to progress their goal?
Oh, that actually is Dungeon World, but Dungeon World took it from Apocalypse World, so I guess.
Sorry. All right, Dungeon World, my bad.
No,
but like that's what he did, and then he gives a bunch of examples of like how to use it in 5e, and it's like really dumb easy.
Yes, and that it's that me saying the things you were describing are reactive was not me saying like you were wrong. I was just pointing out people often.
Go for it.
Well, people often don't like. The problem is I'm skirting a fine line here, and I'm trying to be as clear with the fine line as possible, but it's kind of tricky, and it's also kind of a sliding scale too. So I'm sure there's going to be some people that disagree with me, and they're like, "What do you mean 5e has all this shit?" And I'm like, yes, it does, but it doesn't. Like, yes, it does, but not in the way that I'm thinking about. It's like a whole thing.
That's probably honestly why I'm having a lot of trouble following you throughout this whole episode.
Well,
I'm not gonna lie.
It's like
I get your reasoning on why like you're having certain issues with 5e, and I get the fronts mechanic, the dragon idea from Ryutama. I like it, but also again in my head I'm like, it's a cool idea, but maybe it's because I'm probably I'm like 6 feet deep in the 5e hole.
You are too deep in the 5e hole. See, okay, so this is something that does genuinely piss me off. Or I shouldn't say piss me off. Genuinely annoys me, I guess. People who are 6 feet in 6 feet deep in the 5e hole. Jesus.
Whatever. 5 feet deep in the 6 feet hole?
5 feet in the 6 and whatever. People that are sucking D&D's cock super hard. Like
what is this, a JoJo's convention?
Yes.
Oh my fucking
it's
God.
It's a JoJo-themed D&D convention.
I think I've made that reference before.
You probably have. I am okay with you, sucking off 5e like a golden god. That's fine. But I do get annoyed when I'm talking about the other stuff that I've been talking, when I've been talking about these proactive GM side mechanics, I do get annoyed when people either A, go like, sounds like too much work, or B, are like, nah, I don't need it, I know what I'm doing. Like, they just dismiss that shit, just out of turn. That shit annoys the fuck out of me. And like, or another one that people will often be like, I don't want any constraints on my creativity, man. It's like, bro, sometimes you need them. Or not need them, but like, you'd be amazed how helpful they can be. You know what I mean? And it's fine if it's fine if you tried it or messed around or whatever, or looked into it and you're like, whatever, I'm good. But the dismissiveness does drive me a little crazy. Not that I'm saying you're doing that, Matt, but that is something I have run into before, and Isaiah has run into before, and it's,
yeah, buddy.
And also, I think a lot of people get scared, or not scared, but like, a lot of people get hesitant to, like, for example, Matt, right? I bring up the dragon thing from Ryutama, and your immediate reaction was, nope, DMPC's bad, right?
Well, because I originally, before I heard the explanation of what exactly it was, that's why I went to, because I've heard so many fucking horror stories.
Right. But that's what I mean is, people who've only played D&D often have that reaction anytime you try and describe these different kinds of GM mechanics, because it's not something 5e has by default, right? Unless you work it in, and people will often be like, no, that's bad. 5e doesn't do that. That's bad, right? So I say, oh, there's a GM character sheet, and Matt's brain goes, DMPCs are bad. And it's like, well, hold the fucking phone and A, hear the explanation, and B, consider that it's not the same game, which is a big thing, because everyone's always looking at, not everyone, but a lot of people look at other, if they are looking at other games, they're looking at it through the lens of D&D. And when you look at everything through the lens of D&D, you might see a mechanic that in D&D probably would be a bad idea, but in a different game is not a bad idea. The mechanic in Masks where your stat points move around on the fly would not be a good mechanic in D&D, right? That's
God,
not
no.
right.
No,
Like,
absolutely not.
all of a sudden your constitution is lower. That's not a good idea in D&D. But in Masks, it's there for a purpose. It makes sense. It's a different kind of game. So, did I hear someone say something?
No, I'm letting you rock it, bro.
No, well, I'm blabbing, so I'm trying to also, if someone makes a noise, I'm trying to pay attention.
No, I mean, like, you are talking a lot, but it is like, you are sort of the resident expert on this. So while
I know, which
we might not be,
I wish I wasn't.
This seems to, it's not really a debatatory or
No, I'm just espousing information, I guess.
This is more of a,
but you are teaching a valuable lesson.
Episode.
You know what I mean? Like, because I agree with you. And honestly, I actually kind of know where Matt's coming from, because I heard GM, like, the little twinge in the back of my fucking head was like, but I was like, I want to hear what this is about, because
when I said GM character sheet?
Yeah, because I'm running 15 fucking thousand NPCs, and 6 of them are with the party at the moment. So if there's a thing out there that'll make my life a little fucking easier, I'm gonna go for it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. It's yes, and obviously you can't control, like, instinctive reactions, right? But when people have those kinds of reactions and then they double down, that's
just
what I'm like,
dismiss entirely without listening.
Yeah.
I did just have a thought though. So maybe this is a better way to put it. I don't know if this is a better way to put it, but we're gonna give it a shot. So I said the whole reactive and proactive thing, right? Mm-hmm. I think another way I could put it is that I like it when a game has GM story building mechanics. That's really what it is, right? Because if we think about the examples I've given so far, Fronts in Apocalypse World is you're building up the story via the various things going on in the world, right? That is a mechanical build up of the story, because the players then react to the fronts, and that is how the game flows. The faction turn is you're literally playing a little mini game to get a what's the word I'm looking for? What's the word? A story that creates itself, a I keep wanting to say immersive, but that's not the right word at all. Story that like, damn. Fuck. Somebody help. Oh no.
I'm trying to follow my
There's
guy.
a word.
Listen, the only thing I can think of is self-fulfilling prophecy.
No,
but like, I don't think
but like a fuck, dude. Oh god damn it.
Yeah, go on.
gone.
You got it. Don't let
trying.
it go.
I'm trying so hard. Like a self. It's like a story that writes itself. You learn about it as you go along. That's the main thing, right? Is the idea of you learn the story as you go. It's an expanding story. It's a God.
I don't know.
Damn it. I don't know either.
I'm trying so hard.
I don't know either.
He's broken himself. We didn't even have to do anything.
So
I made a
much.
sandcastle.
I hate it. Anyway, point being, the faction turn is a story that, like, the story comes out of you playing this little mini game, right? So, like, as you play the mini game, it's like, oh, the rebellion is doing good right now, right? And then that becomes a little story because via the mini game, the rebellion's beating up their dictatorship, you know? Damn, it's bugging me. I can't think of the word that I want. It's gonna 20 minutes from now. I'm gonna just shout it.
You're just gonna scream it at the top of your lungs, and we're just gonna be terrified.
You aren't already terrified?
Yeah, right. And then with the dragon in Ryutama, the dragon guides the story via their powers because the powers they have give the players bonuses to doing certain things, right? So like the example I gave was if the players are pushing towards their objective, they can ignore the difficult weather, right? So that is reinforcing the story you're trying to tell via the mechanic of the dragon. With the mechanic in Masks, the whole reason that your stats go up and down is to tell the story of you being a teenager and you not understanding your place in the world. Because, you know, when you're 16 years old and your hormones are going all over the place, your brain don't work very good sometimes, and you don't know who the fuck you are. So that's kind of what Masks is trying to represent by having your stats fluctuate a whole bunch, because you don't really truly know who you are yet. And then there are mechanics that later in Masks where you can actually lock a stat in place and you say, no, this is me. Like, this is a part of me. I know I am this kind of a person. I'm locking this in. You can't move this no matter what. You know, and that's, again, like in real life, you sort of decide certain things about yourself and you're like, nope, this is a thing. So it's the idea of the idea of having story influencing GM mechanics. That's really what I'm getting at. That's the thing that I really like to have. Is that I feel like that was a better explanation, barring the 5-minute brain fart. Right?
Yes,
Matt?
Yes, that works better.
You kind of get what I mean now, Matt?
Better, but still kind of.
What are you still not clear on?
Matt, please.
No, honestly, it's mostly because I'm listening, but I'm also just rereading bits of the DMG, trying to find an example I can use.
So Matt doesn't know what I'm talking about because he's not listening to me.
Half of that.
You bastard.
This motherfucker.
That's okay. He could be thinking about something worse, like frame grilled hot dog hot pockets. No, not hot pockets.
You what now?
Sam, what are you talking about?
At least I'm like,
you never had flame grilled hot dog flavored Pop-Tarts? That's what it was.
Now need to fuck?
Listen, I said it could be worse. Yeah.
I have no words.
Mm-hmm.
Josh, please. I'm gonna mail a drop kick to Sam.
I don't know either what Sam's talking about, and now I'm a little mad that Matt wasn't totally listening to me because I felt like that was a pretty good explanation.
It was, yes.
I'm sorry. I'm literally trying to I read through the DMG to find some example because I'm like, all right, there's got to be something I use and when I'm playing D&D where I can try and help me connect to this idea better. And it's like either this is I'm just either reading through bits and pieces, half listening. So I'm like, oh wait, shit, I gotta pay attention. So that is on me. But also we've been talking, it's been a lot. So my brain's also trying to process everything.
The way you were talking about how you use fronts in your game is the kind of thing I'm talking about.
Yeah.
Right?
No, I'm trying to find other examples.
Basically, to TLDR, my whole rant I went on that you didn't hear is the types of mechanics that a book that the designers make for you as the GM that influence the story. The types of mechanics where it's like, this mechanic will help you tell this kind of story. It will push you in this specific direction. That's the shit I'm talking about. So like I was saying with the dragons and Ryutama, because the dragons have specific abilities pertaining to certain types of narratives, by using the dragon's abilities, you are pushing the players down the path of that narrative. Because and presumably everyone has agreed on the type of narrative you're taking part in, obviously, because obviously if everyone's not on the same page, that's a different thing.
Right, and I think with 5e, because again, just like when I was glancing through the DMG, they don't have, it's not like specifically like a mechanic. It's like, here's like a text box, here's like a list of bullet point things you can do.
Yeah, they have little ideas.
And then it's up to you to kind of like connect the dots.
Well, that's exactly what Josh was complaining about, is that there is no solid framework to any of it. It's a bunch of suggestions.
It's a bunch of suggestions,
based on honestly uncountable amount of variables.
Well, I think the main thing when they were thinking, when you're looking specifically with 5e, unless you're running, which most people homebrew, I'm assuming most people play homebrew campaigns. Most people don't play, not the majority, but I'm assuming it's like a 60-40 between people who only run the adventures that come out and people who homebrew. If you run, like, if you use the 5e stuff, if you use everything in the DMG with, like, let's say you're running Tyranny of Dragons or Storm King's Thunder or whatever, probably going to have an easier time than just, like, I'm doing my own world, what the fuck, throw the kitchen sink at it.
I'm going to be real. I actually don't 100% agree with that.
Wait, rephrase it?
So Matt's basically saying he understands that you're having this problem, but if you're like super careful and like eloquently use the tools given to you, it is doable.
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, like, specifically, if you use the tools in the DMG when you're running non-homebrew games, like if you're running a pre-written adventure, something that someone's already thought about, written the story beats, written the encounters, and give them to you, you will probably have a lot easier time than someone who's running in a homebrew world, who has to connect the dots, has to make the encounters, have to make the story beats, the fronts, all that, and figure out it on when the adventure module will just do it for you. Or if you use Pathfinder examples, the I think what are they called? The adventure paths, or something like that. That at least that's what I'm getting at.
So why don't you agree, Isaiah, real quick? Because I have a thought, but I'll let you.
No, I sort of just misunderstood what he was saying. That's
okay. Yes. So interesting. So you bring up pre-written adventures. Pre-written adventures do sometimes have what I'm talking about.
Curse of Strahd does.
Yeah, Curse of Strahd does, because the Taroka cards, right? Are you referring to? Yeah. So the Taroka cards is a specific mechanic that will influence and push the story in a specific direction and gives the GM very concrete, like, do this to get this result type situation. So yeah, if you're talking about adventure modules, Matt, yes, that often will do kind of have that more. Another thing is like sometimes they'll have like NPCs with you, right? Like Lulu in Descent into Avernus is a little bit of this, where she is sort of like a GM mechanic, sort of pushing you in a specific direction, right? Like she kind of is like the Ryutama dragon, you know, not exactly, but that kind of a vibe. And some of the adventure modules will have unique mechanics to like cause specific things to happen. Like, you know, of course now I say that and then all the examples fly out of my fucking head. But yeah, adventure basically, damn it. can't think. Doesn't the wait? Oh, Matt, you would know. Doesn't Icewind Dale have like a some sort of a like timer force choice type mechanic built into like at least the first part of it? Or something, right? You have to like choose which towns to go to or something like that.
Oh, the DM, yeah, the DM chooses what town out of the 10 towns to start the campaign in. And then depending on which town you start in, there's, you know,
but can't, like,
a lot of different paths.
Can't something happen to the towns if you don't do something within a certain time period? Oh, you're talking
about all right, so spoilers for Icewind Dale. Yeah, there's a big metal fuck off dragon that shows up, and basically if you it's a race against the dragon is flying to each town in a specific path. Yeah. And the players are chasing the dragon, and basically you have to decide like where do we confront the dragon, which towns do we save, which spoilers, the best plan is to go to the very last town and just save that one. Like, what? You can't even see, like, there's no feasible way for players to be able to not only defeat the dragon, but to chase the dragon. Like, the dragon flies so much faster that by the time you get to the first town it destroyed, it's like 5 towns down. There's no way to chase it. So the best solution is to either cut it off somewhere in one of the other later towns, or just say fuck it and heavily defend the shit out of the very last town.
That's kind of
one of those very it's very odd because two of our players were from the first town that got fucked, and they're like, well, I gotta go save my hometown, and it's like we literally can't. It's impossible.
It was gone 20 minutes ago.
Yeah, it's like there's no fucking way, and they're like and we were all confused. They're like, there's absolutely no way to save the town. We literally can't do anything, and I'm assuming that was on purpose, but it's weird that the best outcome was to let 9 of the 10 towns get destroyed.
Yeah, what are you supposed to do then?
You're supposed to go to the last town, heavily fortify it, and just spring a trap for the dragon.
So the game just tells you to get fucked.
Yeah, basically.
What?
It's really strange.
I really don't like that.
Yeah, we didn't either, especially since the dragon, like, again, more spoilers. The dragon is made of some sort of special fiend-ish metal infused material. And so it's like, you can't really touch the dragon, constantly, like, how dragons normally have frightful presence. This one just had like a madness effect. It was really odd.
Is that all? It just did all those things? It just
did all those things. And it had, instead of a breath weapon, it just had a mega laser beam. Yeah, just a mega fuck off laser beam that did siege damage.
Ooh.
Yeah.
What the fuck is this game? I've heard good shit about this, but that sounds awful.
Yeah, like the first time we encountered it, me and our barbarian got affected by its madness effect, and basically we're stabbing the shit out of each other for the first like 3 rounds of combat. Just letting this thing destroy the town, while the other party members were like, "What the fuck are you idiots doing? Help!"
Yeah, I mean,
it was really bad. It was really fucking bad.
Jesus Mary! All right.
Yeah. I have no idea. I haven't like gone through and read anything of Icewind Dale after the campaign of like how you're supposed to do certain things, or like just looking up mechanics or stats or anything, because I'm just like, I'm just gonna let that rest. But that is one thing that I'm like there's nothing. I don't know if it was like we're gonna pit the players against an impossible foe type of scenario. Like maybe that was their mindset, or here we're gonna put the players in an unwinnable situation and see if they can win.
Yeah, neither of those are good.
Yeah. Icewind Dale is a very, very mixed bag of an adventure. I'm not gonna lie.
Fucking seems like it. Jesus Mary.
Like we had fun, but there, like, and I've mentioned to you, there are times where everyone was just kind of like frustrated. The players, the GM, like, because there's a lot of just questionable, head scratching things.
Emergent!
Just like, but why?
Emergent!
Oh,
Emergent
my God,
storytelling.
I think it was almost 20 minutes. I think it was about 14 minutes.
He actually fucking just
What?
Matt's just so lost that he didn't even.
Holy shit!
That word that he was looking for to describe the way the
Emergent
story
was the word
is
I was
told.
looking for. Emergent storytelling. That's what I was trying to say. It's that concept where, like, if you play like a multiplayer game, like you play a round of Fortnite and then you have a story about it afterward, that's emergent storytelling. What I was trying to say is the faction turns and Stars Without Number are any form of emergent storytelling because you, after you do the faction turn, you tell a story about what happened from the mechanics. That's the word I was looking for. I'm sorry, Matt. I was listening to your rant about Icewind Dale. Yes, the dragon situation is shitty.
My man just busted.
No, that's fine. I thought you said emergency. I thought you originally said emergency.
I really did.
I was like, wait, emergency. I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, what's happening?
Emergent storytelling. Oh my god. It was one of those things where I was like, I can feel it jiggling in my fucking cerebellum and I just couldn't think of the word. Holy shit.
God bless. I just
Sorry, Matt, were you
Yeah, no, that was it. That was it. Yeah.
So
Icewind Dale confusing adventure.
I'm sorry.
No, you're good.
Shit. That was the biggest Jimmy Neutron brain blast. What I did want to say in response to what you were just talking about, Matt, yes, you were looking for something within D&D to help you make sense of this. Adventure modules are probably the closest thing. Adventure modules are, in a lot of ways, a big package of GM mechanics to tell the GM how to push the story along. So
right. So which is probably why, my models steal everything, which is probably I don't have a lot of issues because there's so much material out there that I take and rip from, or I'm like, I like that, but what if I did this instead and warp it into my own idea?
So, it's funny too that you say that, Matt, that you even bring in the adventure module comparison and the stealing and stuff, right? Because I haven't run a module. Right?
Yep.
So I didn't even think about that, right? I didn't even think about that comparison, but now you brought it up, I realized I have not run a module. So
you should try running like a one shot or something, either like an Adventure League thing, or
I may like running a module,
or like what I did with you guys. I ran White Plume, grab something from Tales of Yawning Portal or Ghosts of Saltmarsh, and just see.
Yeah, maybe. I would rather run like a full module, Descent or whatever. But yeah, I could also take a piece of one of the other ones or whatever. And you know what else is funny? You mentioning adventure modules, Matt. One of the times that I feel more comfortable running 5e is when I'm doing a dungeon.
Yeah.
Right?
Because I think we joked about that too, where it's like all the people complained. They're like, oh, how
yes,
6 to 7 encounters, just throw them in,
Yeah. But it's not even just that, because if you think about it, a dungeon, now, obviously, I don't like coming up with the dungeon, right? Coming up with it, finding a map or making a map or whatever. That shit is annoying, I'm not gonna lie. But once I have the whole dungeon laid out, right? Once I've done all that prep part, running the dungeon I like, because essentially I have created my own GM mechanic, which is to say the players go through the dungeon. I have different encounters and different things that happens in each of the rooms, and the game's telling me what to do, except I'm telling me what to do by way of the game. So I'm sort of lying and tricking to myself, but it works.
My man, gaslighting him damn self.
But in a good way. I gaslight myself in a good way.
God bless.
So that's we did it, Matt. We found our common ground.
We did it. Dungeons in my Dungeons and Dragons. I can't believe it.
Dungeons in a lot of ways are kind of what I was talking about. The peace treaty has been
signed, everybody.
We did it.
We got it. Blinds were open.
No, I mean, real talk.
Stare off into the distance. Forlornly.
Sam and Isaiah, do you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I do. I've been
No, I mean with the dungeon adventure module comparison.
Yeah.
All right.
Which, it's funny, right?
I'm just trying to make sure I don't sound crazy, No,
you don't. But I find it fucking hilarious, because I've said this to you before, and yes, and you say what you will about the setting that I'm running. Dungeons make me wish for death.
True.
If you think about it, everything's a dungeon.
That is also true.
that did help me a little bit, right? Because I remember the three of us were for like a week trying to help me rack my brain for like a short dungeon that didn't make me want to blow my head off. And eventually you were like, well, just 3 rooms is a dungeon, dude. It's just a small one. And I was like, oh, you can do that? Yeah. You don't need dungeons that are 25, 30 rooms, and you just have to come up with something interesting for all of them, and you have to sort of set hooks for each one and a reason to go in there, because if you have empty rooms, it seems like you're not doing your job right and that you're a horrible GM. You're saying that's possible?
Yeah, there's small dungeons, and then mega dungeons.
I mean,
like there's different tiers.
30 million feet. Feet down? Yeah, feet down.
Feet down.
Not floors, feet down.
It is also worth
30,000 floor dungeon.
I mean, if you really want to get into it, everything is a dungeon you could get real far with, because even going through the forest, going from point to point into town, it's all dungeons.
Do you guys remember in Avernus, the Thorn Forest?
Yeah, that's a dungeon.
I do.
Yeah, it was a dungeon. Yeah, it was a dungeon, mate.
But I mean, if you think about it, literally having your players go to a masquerade ball and having to navigate the social norms of high society and make a bunch of checks or whatever related to is essentially a dungeon. You're having them go from encounter to encounter to encounter and trying to figure out the problem. It's a dungeon. But that is a whole other thing, so we won't go down that path. But I do want to ask Isaiah a quick question first. You say the dungeons make you want to die. Question though, while you are running the dungeon, so not prepping it, but once the session's going on, do you like that?
No,
you don't even like running the dungeon.
No,
interesting.
Because I feel like for me, the encounter. I should punch my mic. The encounters that I really enjoy doing are the like, how do I explain it? I like to do this sort of like, oh God, now I can't think of the fucking phrase.
Immersion.
No, it's not. It's not fucking emergent. I like the if I want to do like a story beat, I like the travel, like the travel, the investigation, the goal. You know what I mean? Like I like being able to sort of, and the travel can be like, you drive from point A to point B. It can be, you're walking down the hallway just to like get the spot, because there's like I can sort of have my finger on the dial and tune the tension or the emotion that I have in mind based on what's going on, and the way that I can describe the length and the sound and the muttering of the NPCs. But when it's a dungeon, it's this like it feels what's the phrase I'm looking for? It feels just like one long run-on sentence, if that makes sense. I feel like I have to describe everything, every turn, every this, every that. It makes me.
When you pause there, I had to resist the urge to say emergent.
No,
but what if you didn't? Okay.
But Isaiah, is not the thing you were describing initially, traveling from point A to point B, investigating the problem, and then doing the encounter, is that not a dungeon?
Yes, it is. Because the dungeon has this sort of expectation of, there has to be twists and turns, and there has to be the traps and loot. To me, it does. I've said this before. If we do a dungeon and there's a room with just nothing in it, I'm like, well, this is a waste of time. And I know that that's me projecting, right? Like, that's not really fair to the dungeon, but I can't like shake that feeling that I'm wasting my time if I walk into a room with nothing in it. So I feel like I have to put something in.
Well, they usually, like, from what I remember, they usually do that because it's either players are trying to hide from something or they need a place to rest, and they're like, all right, here's an empty, I don't know why a closet would be in a cave, but here's an empty closet that the fucking, I don't know, the drow are using. So we're just going to hide in the closet and fucking like put up a wall barrier and sleep. Yeah, I know. I just said, yeah, my bad.
Okay, so you just reminded me of, so in Storm King's Thunder, in the basic adventure that you do in the beginning, if you don't want to start at level 3, there's a cave where all the people that have been like kidnapped are being held hostage, and there's a section of the cave that just has a boulder that you just move out of the way, and it's just like a safe space if you move the boulder back. It's like a closet inside the dungeon.
Hey, there you
go. I don't want to go too much deeper down this rabbit hole because this feels like it could be its own entire episode. But what I will say, Isaiah, is maybe consider thinking about dungeons the way you think about everything else. Rather than fearing it, adjust the dungeon to the mental space that you're already operating in.
Yeah, and I like
however that works, whatever that means, however that goes for you is up to you, but consider.
I think, I mean, I know I have been, or I did with that last one, and I think maybe I finally cracked the code.
Try more of that.
I think another thing is, right, is I like having a lot of wiggle room, and I feel like when I build a dungeon, I'm foregoing that wiggle room to be like, we're doing something very highly structured, we got to do this kind of by the books, and I just...
Well, that gets into that whole situation of I feel like I don't have any wiggle room, but you got to remember at the end of the day, your players can't see what your notes are unless you show them. So you could just be like, never mind, I'm just going to not put anything bad in this room. I changed my mind,
I could, yeah. But then you get into things like, well, how like the balance of loot and hey, risk versus reward. That's the thing I'm going to talk about next week.
Yeah. So again, this feels like it should be its own topic. So I won't, because more thoughts are flowing into my brain as saying things. So I'm gonna stop myself because we're out of time, more or less. Side note, I said to myself, I didn't say this out loud, but I said to myself before we started, I was like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to go on for 2 hours about this. I don't know why I thought that would be the case, because I say that to myself every time, and then we hit 2 hours every time. Anyway, I should just stop saying that to myself. Any final thoughts and or questions from the three of you would you like to say before we close the Christmas present?
Game cool.
No, what I do want to say is that it seems like, and everyone, cross your fingers for this, it seems like the writers at Wizards are aware of this exact problem. So hopefully, if everything goes right, this episode will sort of be an artifact of times long gone with one D&D's nuts. And I really hope it is, right? Like, because this is a known problem, right? This is that one really annoying statement that everybody makes about 5e. That's not the right word I'm looking for. It is a very often reoccurring argument where it's like, well, the game doesn't do these things for you. Find the game that does do the things for you. And if we can hit a middle ground where 5e is doing those things for you, maybe not perfectly, maybe not yet, but if they're aware of it and they're working on it, that makes me hopeful that whatever comes next will be that thing that everyone can look to and be like, that's gonna be good,
I am not confident necessarily that that's the case, but we shall see.
I am cautiously optimistic in this moment.
Fair enough.
I'm ready to be like, damn, bro, shit blows. But I'm trying not to.
What are you basing this thought off of, if I may ask?
Well, it was I watched the UA video that came out today, and sort of Jeremy Crawford explaining some of the thought processes that came into or that are coming into what's to come with 1D&D, and I don't want there to be a world where one game does everything, because then there's no variety. But if it makes it so that I don't have to hunt down the archaic or otherwise unknown systems, if the game just has something built in that meshes well with the rules that are already established, it just makes DMing that much easier,
Okay. All right. Matthew?
I like fronts. They're very nice.
You know what? I will count that as a win.
Yeah.
That's basically all I got.
I will take that W. We'll take that W. All right.
Yeah. And basically, if you don't have the DMG, Return to Lazy Dungeon Master is a very, very good, probably better alternative.
Yeah.
2 thumbs up.
Probably. Alrighty. Well, this has been Les Sessions Are Cancelled. As I said before, please follow us on your podcast platform of choice. Hit the subscribes on the YouTubes and follow for Twitter if you would like the updates for me to tell you, for example, why an episode was late or some such nonsense. It's probably, I don't know, it's either mine or Brett's fault 9 times out of 10. Actually, every time. So, do with that information what you